This is Ibali Lokuvuka, the comeback story, with a bit of an edge, with a bit of a difference. We're talking real stories from the sporting arena. And this time around with me is none other than Mthunzi, Fudge, Mabeta, former Blue Bulls lock, former SA Juniors lock, and a man with some of the most incredible rugby stories, a man known the country over as one of the nicest fellas the game has ever seen. Fudge, as a person that knows you in a personal capacity, can I say that it is such a pleasure to be sitting here with you, and we'll be talking about your journey, the highs and the lows, and how you went through it all. But you're from cross-cultural parents. Your father is South African and your mother is American, am I correct?
Yeah, American Swedish, yes.
American Swedish.
Yeah.
So you are a man of the world.
There's a bit of a Swedish bloodline in there as well. My grandfather came from Sweden. My great-grandparents, actually from my mother's side, came from Sweden, and then my grandmother was American. So there's a quarter Swedish in there as well. But multicultural, diversified.
Some Swedish in there, some American, put a little bit of South African in there. Next thing, you've got this fascinating character called Fudge Mabeta. And growing up, how did that sort of influence you as a child? You know, obviously, you would have been around a lot of guys whose parents are either both Afrikaans or Afrikaans English or Xhosa. And Xhosa, you know, there's a pretty linear sort of environment in terms of culturally, but you, like you explained, there's some Swedish, there's some American, and there's some South African. How was that for you growing up?
Look, this is South Africa, you know, and of course we're going through so many changes, and it must be it is an incredible experience growing up in this country, you know, for any culture.
You were born here or born in the US?
I was born in the US. My family moved back this side when I was 3 years old, so 1990. I was straight to Ngwahuma Belentombi in the Eastern Cape, my home. I'm so proud of, and I absolutely love a beautiful part of the world. And I got to grow up there. I went to Queen's College Primary School. And you know, that's where the story of rugby and all of that all began. But it was such you asked me how it was growing up in that environment. I think in hindsight, and that's what, you know, every adult gets to that point in their life where they look back and they start understanding, where did I gain this sort of a privilege? Where did I gain this perspective? How has it helped me become the man that I am? And I cannot even give you a value in terms of how valuable that was. Very difficult to even gauge. Invaluable experience. It's allowed me a perspective which is global, you know, and it's helped me with sport. It's helped me with my life. It's helped me with my friendships. It's helped me become the father that I am, you know, and I can't reiterate how important and how gifted and privileged what a privilege and a gift it was to actually have that sort of a parent situation.
What sort of lessons do you get from your parents and your mother, who's, you know, in America, they didn't have to deal with apartheid, but they had their own sort of racial tension and racial struggles. And how did that then influence your thinking and your perspective with the world?
Jeez, you're going.
You're asking all the real
questions. You're asking all the real questions, but you know what? I like that. And of course, I must have thought about it thousands of times. You know, I spoke about that hindsight and how people, you know, try to put together how they became who they are, right? And wow, it just, you know, growing up in that environment, how it helped me. It allowed me to connect with the person, you know, with the soul, you know. And I can't tell you how valuable that's been in my path. You know, even to this day, I can still find the value in that, in being able to, just by sitting down with someone, your energy, you connect with someone. You know, you don't see color or class. You appreciate culture, its relevance in this more and more modern world we're living in, you know, where things are becoming commercialized. And so it's just allowed me the space to connect with really what matters. You know, and what a platform to work off of in any pursuit in life, right? As a commentator, as a rugby player, what it gave me and how it allowed me to connect with the different players around me. And being at the Blue Bulls, you know, it's a culture that I wasn't used to, you know, the Afrikaans culture, but I was able to connect with the players there on the pitch. You know, I was able to have incredible experiences connecting so closely with Afrikaans players, Xhosa players as well. I played with some Xhosa guys as well, and it just I became more of a cement in a team, you know, and it allowed me to progress very quickly in the teams I was in and in rugby in general in the end.
And you had a fascinating rugby story. I mean, you were at Queen's, you were at Grey PE at some point, but you ended up at Pretoria Boys High School, great school, if I could just put that in there. And then when you got there, you weren't exactly a rugby product, but how did then Fudge Mabeta, the lock that we now know, develop? How did that come about?
Well, I've got some friends to thank for that. One of those guys being Bulali Dazana. Because I was at Grey High School and we enjoyed the game so much. From down to the TV game, we'd wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning, you know, and go play PlayStation, rugby. I think it was rugby 08 or 05, not sure, but from the Jonah Lomu rugby games that came out, you know, I just really enjoyed the game. You could call me addicted to it, you know, at a very young age, where I wasn't playing in any A teams, but I was playing a lot of touch rugby. I was a border, so I had a lot of time in the afternoons to, you know, to
muck
kill,
about.
basically, to muck about. You know, and you throw a ball around and you start enjoying it, and I just absolutely loved playing. I didn't really find my feet at a young age. I was good enough. I played in the B team, came off the bench once or twice for an A team, here or there. You know, I can't even remember exactly where it was, but because of some of the friends I had, I really enjoyed rugby a lot more, you know, with the likes of my best friend Bulali Tazan at the time. And then of course at Pretoria Boys High School, then it was Paul Anthony, you know, who identified me, and sort of for the first time in my rugby experiences and playing the game, for the first time he actually said, listen, you look like you're quite tall, you look like you've got skills, you're athletic, you know, come give this thing a shot, you know. And it's not all about the physical attributes when you're 17 years old, you know. When you're about to actually consider that, hey, I could play in a first team, dream is coming true, I took that very seriously as well. And I tried to train, I tried to run extra kilometers. I was actually jogging from my home in Pretoria to the training sessions just to get a little bit of an edge, you know, to be a little bit fitter. Because I understood that if you're fit, you get to the ball quicker. You're more involved in the game. And you can
last the game longer.
Exactly. You have more opportunities to shine, right? And that made sense to me. But what Paul Anthony did is he really helped me with the psychological side of things. I hated taking contact. I don't know if I was scared. I was never really scared in terms of taking someone on, but
you weren't like thirsting for contact.
I wasn't thirsty for contact. I'd shy away out of tackles, and he introduced me to that. I'd never really jumped before at lock. I only started in matric as well, and the care he had for me and the way he was able to interact with me as a mentor at that stage was just extremely valuable.
That's funny because when eventually you did break through into then making the Blue Bulls Craven Week team, and you were at Grey the last time Grey had hosted the Craven Week, you then became an understudy to one of the Springbok greats, probably the greatest lock of all time South Africa's ever had, which is Victor Madfield. And not just an understudy in the sense that you're playing the same position, but in the sense that people can see what Victor has, and it can be transferred to you because you're showing the same traits in terms of line-out calling, in terms of reading the game, in terms of putting others into a position where the ones that do want to take the contact up, they've got the space to do that, and you're there to make sure that all the boxes are ticked. I mean, no one will say Victor was the most physical lock, but he had Bakkies, and Bakkies wanted to take it up. So in order for Bakkies to shine, Victor needs to make sure that the line-out is secure, and people saw you as that guy when it got to the Bulls. How was that journey, and what was it being like being at the Bulls at the height of the Bulls rugby history?
It was an absolute pleasure. Of course, very difficult as well, being a highly rated player and having to wait your turn. But wow, what a privilege playing. under the best. Paki Sport had a big influence on me as well. He really raised how I understood contact and how I understood how to make the best of it, you know, being a much lighter player. And I realized that a lot of it has to do with the mind.
Right.
A lot of it has to do with how you attack that first inch, you know, and that the Paki Sporta has that. He's got that, you know, let me go for it. Let me dominate this contact point.
Right.
Now, he could do that physically out of his physique.
Yes.
But I didn't have that, which is where a player like Victor Matfield helped me a lot. A much smarter player, technically sound, tackle technique has to be sound, you know, so that you cancel out.
So you're
that
not compromised because of your weight as well.
Exactly. You know, and of course the plus of it is then in lineouts, you're lighter, you're quicker on the ground.
Right.
And a player like Victor Matfield, you as we all know, took advantage of that as well. You know, so I was able to look at these legends of the game and feel confident with the traits I had, feel confident in what I need to develop, and you know, it's just a gift having access to that every single training session, training against them. So now you're not just watching them and being told you need to form your game or you know, package your game like this. No, you're playing against them. You're actually learning, okay, this is how you read the game. You know, this is how you start creating those arcs, you know, of getting to the ball quicker, predicting, anticipating where the ball's going to go, realizing how different players play, realizing how to read someone in a line out, who's making the call. And of course, Victor Matfield was a huge factor in terms of my development and becoming a line-out specialist, you know, definitely competing against him as well. You can imagine, you're competing against the best.
It got to a point then where your succession planning you needed to be the #1 guy at the Bulls, you needed to be in Springbok contention, and then your birth country, the USA, say, look, we've got a World Cup spot for you here playing for USA at the Rugby World Cup 2011, and you turn it down.
Yeah, look, it was a difficult decision to make.
Yeah,
I can only imagine there are quite a few South Africans who've had that difficult decision,
offer,
you know, because of there just not being enough of a platform for really talented players to play here in South Africa. You know, the structure is going under. It's being developed and it's progressing, and of course in a country that's so dynamic and so diverse, so many different cultures, that's only a positive thing. But at that time, it was difficult, but it's so good for your career, and you just need to have patience, because ultimately you do become a better player.
Yeah.
But you have to trust in the coaching structures, and your career is literally in the hands of the management. You know, and it's a business at the end of the day. You've got contracted players. You need to try to shift them around. So very difficult for you within all of that to still trust someone who's not of the same culture or has the same background as you. And I've spoken about that. I think it's important in any environment that is a business or that is a career for you to have that trust of your colleagues, your employees. It's vital, you know. And in sport, it's you know, it's the you make it or don't, you know, because of that trust factor. And Rassie Erasmus is a good example of that. He understands, and I think he's a better player manager than Alistair Coetzee was. Maybe one of the best we've had. I draw back to the memories of Kitch Christie, you know, guys who just are able to trust and connect with the person, you know, with the person behind the culture, behind the race, behind the language, and connect and trust. Get to that trust factor quicker. And I think that was the big challenge at the union at that time. And so your opportunities are far and few between. Yeah. But being in that environment was definitely good for my career. Yeah. It's a fine margin.
And you couldn't separate yourself from your dreams, that environment, and someone else telling you something different, promising the USA, and you think, you know, I'm here where, you know, where you should be if you want to be up there at the very top. You know?
Exactly, and in hindsight, it's a difficult pill to swallow, because I ended up not playing in a World Cup. I probably never will, and that was my dream as soon as I made the first team of Pretoria Boys High School, you know, to become a Springbok. I mean, that's what you're told by the scouts, by the agents, by your coaches, that look, you've got something, you know, you could become, and you start to believe it, and I did. And I believed in that, and I chose not to go to the States.
Yeah.
I chose to stay and to see my time through here in South Africa. And I think that maybe I could have advanced a little bit quicker if I had that trust factor with the management. But at the same time, you know, look, I take nothing back. Things happen for a reason. I wouldn't be where I am today without the things that have happened. So.
Now, then something happens that really causes it all to come crashing down. You're still a player, you're still a Blue Bulls player, you're still at the high end of your career. The Lions want you, the Sharks want you. You can go play Kingsway and Super Rugby. Like, the world is still your oyster. And you get involved in an accident, is it Zanzibar, while you're on holiday.
Yeah, Liberia.
In Liberia. And that's it. That's your rugby career. Gone just like that. And when you're getting a hot dog or a falafel, what are you getting?
So
do you even remember?
No, I do. I remember it clearly. I was standing with my younger brother.
Yeah.
We were standing at a stall in Liberia, and they don't have taxis in Liberia. They have these little motorbikes.
Little tuk-tuks.
And the stalls, of course, will be all around the motorbikes, because the motorbikes will be the rank, right? So we're standing outside of the road next to a stall, ordering a hot dog before we go home after having a few drinks out. It was around 1 o'clock, midnight, you know, not too late. And after a really awesome night of getting to know a few of the locals and myself and my brother connecting, we get this hot dog, and I just heard a bang, you know, a gwah. And a motorbike, before I could even turn my head, a motorbike had flown from the taxi rank into my leg, and it hit my brother in the stomach. And unfortunately for me, it was all of my ligaments were totally third degree torn, totally dislocated. It was
in your knee.
In my knee.
So your MCL, your PCL, your ACL,
that all had
all
tears,
gone.
All gone.
I mean, if you tear one of those, you're in trouble.
It's a mission, you know.
Yeah.
And when it's that, so the first doctor I saw said that you're done with your career. And then I was lucky enough the Blue Bulls did a bit of research, and I was lucky enough to get the next doctor, I forget his name now, Dan Ubey, I think it was. I forget his name now, but it's the same doctor who operated on Bakkies Botha, world-renowned knee surgeon. And he said, you will be able to play again. Let me do this operation, and you're just going to need to take your time. So he said 3 years until your ligaments are as they were before your injury.
Dan du Plessis.
I think so. Yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And,
so what do you decide to do?
So the operation went well. It was a success. My contract was ending the next year. Fortunately, Akona Ndungane.
Yeah.
I tell Bandise Marco, the Blue Bulls hooker, a good friend of mine, this all the time. You know, he convinced me. He seated me down in the auditorium when they'd come in to do a workshop on salary insurance. And fortunately, I took out salary insurance, so it wasn't such a big shock that my contract was ending the next year.
Yeah.
The Bulls decided to end my contract. They didn't see much of a future with me. I was, at the time, also, I guess, having a few problems with them in that final year before the accident. Right. I was having a few issues with them. I was becoming more frustrated. I wasn't getting the opportunities I was expecting. There were opportunities to go out on loan, and I wasn't really allowed to do that because they were so committed with me. And then this just happened at a very bad time. And of course, the Bulls had to make a decision. I would be out for at least 2 years, and I wanted to go for the extra third year being off just to make sure.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to be conservative in how I go about it.
And how old are you at this time?
At this time, I was 23 going on 24. Yeah, this was 2012, 2011.
Yeah, so you've still got about 10 years.
So I'm coming into my prime as a type 5 player. You're coming into your prime at 24. You know,
of professional rugby still to play.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Could you tell, like, sort of mentally, that this is really the end? I can't pursue this any longer.
So, funny enough, so in those 3 years, with the payout I got and everything, having been signed from the age of 18, even before I finished matric, I was already signed to the Blue Bulls. And you know, I did the silly thing of putting all of my peas in one pot, you know. And it's important to get an education. Right. I chose not to. I chose to just focus on my rugby and really pursue it. And in hindsight, maybe that wasn't the best decision. But also in hindsight, I got to travel a little bit, and I ultimately got to go back home to the Eastern Cape. and try to see how I can give back to the communities, how I can get into farming. Social development is my passion, and how I can give back in terms of rugby as well. I speak about development and the progress of development in a quite a deduced and technical manner. And I just felt I've got such an awesome experience of really getting to know, through one of the best unions in the country, the ins and outs of how do you get a fantastic group of talent together, and what does it take for you to become that player at the age of 18 that the big unions are looking at, you know?
The decision then, did it affect you mentally?
It did affect me mentally when I went back to the Eastern Cape, and I started up a borehole drilling company out there. We started building, we started fencing in our plots, family plots that we've had. And once you start connecting with the land, and you start interacting with the school kids out in rural areas, for me, I started to realize that my purpose was outside of the game. And all of a sudden, I wasn't so desperate to get back into the game, and I wasn't missing it as much. I was just really overwhelmed and taken by life outside of rugby. And I committed to that. I continued with my physiotherapy for a full year. I continued during the second year as well. And I got into, basically had recovered fully, where I could play again if I wanted to. But I wasn't sure about it until I get a phone call from Paul Anthony. He moved to the Sharks in the junior levels, and he said, look, where are you? What are you up to? We're having problems right now at Lock. Peter Steph Dutoy, I think, was injured. Lou Vies was also there. He was injured. They called in Marco Wenzel at that time. And so they needed some maturity, I guess, to try and rub off of the guys. And knowing that I was a line-out specialist, they thought that they could add some value in bringing me in and trialing me out. And I went out there under Jake White. Jimmy Wright, big ups to you. He's the one who took me under his wing. A fantastic conditioning coach of the Sharks, been there for a while. And we did some really great work together. And I got into a physical space where I started to believe that maybe I can actually play.
And then what happened?
Myself and Jake White were having conversations. They wanted to see me play before giving me a contract or before arranging anything. I was saying, guys, I've come out from a really serious injury, and I'm not willing to risk that. And so it was a bounce back, bounce forward thing. And during that time, I made a decision that it's time for me to actually start pursuing something solid outside of rugby.
So the uncertainty just wasn't attractive for you anymore?
The uncertainty just wasn't attractive for me anymore. Look, small factors where you start looking at the structures of development in South African rugby and all of that. Even at the Sharks, I started to realize, that there's some junior players here who, are still struggling to get that trust factor in. And it touched me in a way that I missed home, and I wanted to go back to the Eastern Cape and get back to that feeling of purpose. I didn't get that when I went to the Sharks and I started to play again. I loved the game. It was fantastic throwing the ball around, putting
your soul.
Exactly, putting in a shoulder. But I could feel that something had changed. My connection with the game and my understanding of my purpose had changed. And it was easy in the end to walk away from it. I'm a stupendously optimistic person. So I always, even to this day, I still have the little thing. I was joking with Bandisa Michael during the Craven week. And hey, listen, why don't you come in for a trial at the Bulls? It's something that's actually starting to catch on now. JP Peterson's at the Sharks. They've brought back Monet Steyn at the Bulls, so there is value. It's something that's done all around the world, It's called intellectual property, I believe,
So part of the things you're doing as sort of the Fudge, this new act 2 of Fudge Mabeta is commentary. You've risen to become one of the most knowledgeable, I don't want to say, not young in terms of years, but in the media business, you are starting to come into your own as an analyst and as a commentator. And one of the best things you've done is how to analyze and give back to the young game. And how's that sort of, what's that journey said about this new path that you have taken?
Again, Sbu, it's about that purpose, right?
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful, privileged, it's an honor, you know, to have been given the biggest platform to have a say or
Yeah.
to be influential in the things I'm passionate about, which is rugby development, you know, in rural areas. And being able to commentate and analyze games, especially the analytical side of things.
Which is your forte.
Which is my
so to
forte,
speak.
you know.
Yeah.
It's always been what I loved about it. You know, when you're playing PlayStation and all of that, you are actually putting in strategies and game plans, and you know, so I was passionate about it. I was passionate about the development. I was passionate about the knowledge and information and sharing, giving these kids access in rural areas, my home, you know, where I was once a kid, you know, and where I still have friends that I grew up with out there, you know. And so it was just a purpose. It was a purpose thing. I enjoy it. It's a privilege to be. I was with Hugh Bladen with the Affis Maritzburg College game.
Yeah.
Uncle Hugh. What a privilege just for any rugby player. It's an honor, you know, and it's been, I can't even explain how valuable and how privileged I am to actually be in the position I'm in right now, and how it speaks to my dreams in the end.
And when you look back at it all, Fudge, what lessons have you learned about the journey of the highs of being a Blue Bulls player, which a lot of people will not become? So you can take heart in a lot of things that you've done, and the lows, and then the resurgence. What would you say your own journey has taught you about yourself, and what has it taught you about life?
Well, you know, for me, life. It's all about teamwork.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I take from rugby as well.
Right.
Everything is a team. From being in a marriage to being in a friendship, you know, from being, even you and I right now are a team,
Yeah.
you know, and so, you know, game theory and teamwork are just so important for me in every walk of life, and I just absolutely have taken away from my experience at the Blue Bulls, working across barriers that are formed because of differences in culture, because of a lack of diversification. Language barriers, you know, having to work around that. I learned a new language, you know, being there, you know, ultimately. And make no mistake, it's a huge struggle and a culture shock. And for many African and brown-skinned people in the country, it is a shock, you know, being in a space where you need to perform, but you're finding it difficult to connect, or you're finding it difficult to see representation, you know, of your demographic or of your experience. You start to doubt yourself, don't you? You start to lack in confidence. And in sport, that is, you know, you can't have that. You just can't have that. It is going to have a direct impact on your performance. And so, but unfortunately, with every struggle, with every difficulty, you do take away positives. And it made me realize that we don't necessarily all know how to work as a team, but when you know how to work as a team, and I learned that from playing at the Blue Bulls, going back and having a short stint at the Sharks, and now even being at SuperSport, you know, it's just so valuable when it's a perfect laboratory, you know, for you to see, how do I jump these barriers and how do I help others, you know, jump these barriers? How do you communicate? How do you stand up for yourself? Where do you reach out for confidence? You know, how do you believe in yourself, even though maybe other people don't know how to share or speak or express that they do? Maybe you don't believe it because it's just not said in a certain tone that you're used to. You know, maybe you're just not feeling like the coach is your mentor because you're just not used to having a father figure who is from that cultural understanding. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be because you're from a different culture, but there are certain understandings and certain ways you communicate, certain ways you perceive things. And how does one break down those barriers? And how important is that in this country right now, right?
Very.
So it's put me in a position where I can feel I have a purpose. And more than that, I can feel as if I actually have the tools. I'm equipped with the tools because of my experiences to be able to see that purpose through and to be able to give back, and not just give back, but add value to rugby in spaces that have basically been not accessed yet at all, you know.
Oh, buddy, what an amazing, amazing journey. And obviously, this is not the peak of the mountain. There's so many heights that you're still yet to scale. It's been obviously a pleasure just to sit here and take it all in. You've spoken about your journey, you've spoken about purpose, about how you've really just done everything you could in steps, and with each step you always ask yourself, is this for the purpose? Is what's the end goal? You know,
what is the meaning?
What is the meaning behind it? And at the end of the day, it won't be about paychecks, it won't be about awards, it won't be about records, it will be about the impact you've made. And I think in your journey, you've definitely are on the path to making a huge impact. And this particular chat with Mthunzi Fudge Mabeta has definitely gone a long way to cementing your legacy as one of the most inspirational people I have certainly gotten to know. But as a South African, as a man of the world, bit Swedish, bit South African, a bit American, and you won't get a kaleidoscope better than that, and that is Mthunzi Fudge Mabeta. And this has been an amazing, amazing chat. Thanks once again for staying with us and for joining us. Boom, handshake, and we're out.